After going over the situation, I have determined that my conflict is due to the fact that there is a difference in cultures, deaf versus hearing. There has been a miscommunication of my role as an interpreter. It is right for me to complete my job as an interpreter and to keep interpreting for my client, and it is right for me to respect the authority of my hearing consumer and to stop interpreting until the doctor can specifically address my client. So, in order to get to this part of my conflict, I have looked at the facts and the assumptions. So, for a fact, it says rural hospital in the situation, which made me believe that this means the hospital is in a smaller populated area and probably doesn't get many deaf clients in. So they may not be aware of deaf culture at this point, or at least not very aware of it. I also looked at the quote, "he goes nuts." So by the doctor's reaction of going nuts, he shows me that he doesn't really understand my role as well as an interpreter, as well as he just realized that he has disclosed private information to me as the interpreter. So by not understanding my role, he may view my presence as a threat. I have information that I may not have. I'm giving it to my client without his permission. He may think that I'm overstepping his boundaries as an authority figure. He may not know what's going on, and he may feel threatened by that. I also looked at the fact that by performing this conversation in such a public way, that he could be providing harm to my client, even though he's aware that the fact that my client is deaf, he may not understand that, I can hear him, other people may be able to hear him, and they may have this information on my client. So, that could be quite a conflict for him and for me by performing this action in a public place. So, in order to better understand the conflict as a whole, I looked at 3 different areas of the CPC. I looked at confidentiality, which states interpreters adhere to the standards of confidential communication. So again, the doctor does not understand my role as an interpreter, does not understand that I may be held under confidentiality, and he may feel threatened by that. I looked at respect for consumers. Interpreters demonstrate respect for consumers, which specifically, states for the hearing and for the deaf consumers. So, and then I specifically looked at 4.4 of that, which states facilitate communication, access, and equality, and support the full interaction and independence of consumers. So this is where the real conflict comes in. I'm supposed to provide full access of communication, but the doctor, as an authority figure and as my other part of the consumer, has asked me to stop. So what do I do? Well, that can be quite a conflict because you have to decide, what's the best way to approach this? What are the different perspectives of the situation? So in order to understand those perspectives, I first looked at the doctor. So he might be thinking, my client's deaf, I'm not causing any harm by performing this conversation outside of eyesight, but in all actuality he could be. The interpreter is only working when he or the nurse are in the room. That may be another assumption. And he may think that they're only saying what I want them to say, and so he may feel, threatened that seeing the interpreter interpret things that, he was not ready to disclose. And my mom agreed with that. She very much had the doctor perspective. She said, the doctor may be having a private conversation that he doesn't want the client to hear yet. He may be gathering his thoughts. And I thought that was a good thing to consider because, that might exactly be what the doctor was thinking at the time. So then I looked at the deaf consumer, and they may be thinking, my interpreter's here to bring equal access of communication for me, that's why I hired them. By the doctor telling my interpreter to stop, I am completely lost. I'm out of the loop, and that's not fair to me. Which is completely right, By talking to Mateo and Don and Ellie, they all say that, you need to make sure your interpreter, your deaf consumer is aware of everything, You need to be providing equal access to communication. You need to be respectful of them, in every situation. And so you need to keep that in mind as well as your respect for the doctor as well. So I looked at myself and, what I thought about it. And so I have 2 specific consumers, both of which come from very different cultures, and they may not be exactly aware of each other's culture. The doctor has already shown that he may not be aware of deaf culture, but the deaf client may not be aware of, where the doctor's coming from either. So there's that clash of conflict as well. So I really wanted to look at the do no harm. That really played a part in my decision making. Do no harm for my deaf client, do no harm for my hearing consumer. I need to make that decision where I'm going to do the least amount of damage if I make a decision that's, that could potentially cause damage. And who knows, maybe by interpreting or continuing to interpret, I get the doctor in trouble, or the deaf client receives false information that the doctor is just clarifying, I could interpret something wrong. So if I continue to interpret, I may cause harm. So perhaps by the doctor telling me to stop, he wants me to stop because he doesn't have all of the information and he wants to be the one to specifically tell my deaf client what's going on. So I wanted to look at that a lot. And so this made me this was influenced by me speaking to one of my interpreter friends who is in deaf culture right now, who said that that's a really hard decision. You want to make sure your deaf client knows that you're there as an ally and you're doing everything you can to provide everything that they need, but you also are there to protect their interest. The doctor may be stepping out of his bounds, and you're there to make sure that the doctor and the deaf client get along well together. So you want their personalities to mesh, not clash. So my decision ended up being that I would interpret what the doctor said, tell my deaf client that the doctor has asked me to stop interpreting at the moment, and that he will come in and give you all the information when he has it all together and he is ready to discuss it with you. And then I would inform the doctor that I have just told my deaf client, that you have asked me to stop interpreting and I will wait until you are ready to interpret. That way, if the deaf person really wants to inform the doctor that I'm just doing this to provide equal access of communication, they can, but I'm not putting the situation on them where, here, deaf person, what do I do? The doctor just told me this, do you want to fix it? It's not up to the deaf person. If they would like to include something at this time, they're more than welcome to, but I've made the decision that I will interpret what the doctor said, and then I will stop interpreting until the doctor is ready to continue the conversation with the deaf person personally. That was my decision. So then I looked at, what kind of consequences would this have? Short term, I believe the doctor could be annoyed with me. He could be less cooperative. The deaf client may choose to inform the doctor, which may cause the situation to get a little worse, or it may cause it to get a little bit better. But my decision has made, maybe the deaf client will respect me a little bit more. That I've stepped in, I have made a decision, and I'm not putting it on them to decide for this situation. In the long term, the doctor may be a little bit more informed or prepared on what to do next with the deaf client, or they may treat deaf clients a little worse or a little differently, depending on the information that I provide them and the way I approach the situation. The deaf consumer may have more respect for me as a person, and they may have less respect for me. But most importantly, I think also this will help me feel a little bit more confident next time. How do I handle the situation? And so I believe that this was the right choice to make, and I have stood by it. So, thank you.